Hi, thanks for choosing Dead Speaks, highlighting crimes, convictions, found dead, or still missing. One moment, please.
A 55-year-old lifeguard remains in custody this evening, charged in the shooting death of one teenager and the wounding of another. The incident happening Thursday evening outside the Douglas Park pool.
And in the leader pool and get shot by a grown man, an adult that's supposed to have been a lifeguard. It's just devastating and heartbreaking. Seems predatorial to us as men, so I know the judge was gonna be kicked off. Any man will be, because it just don't make sense to have guns at a pool where children, bikes get stolen all the time, if that was his motivation. So it has to be deeper than that, and he does need to be charged with a hate crime.
Douglas Park is more than just a park, it's a heartbeat on Chicago's west side. A historic, sprawling green space where generations of families have gathered to play, to learn, and to dream. It's where kids escape when the city swelters, and lifeguards are trusted to keep the water safe. On the evening of June 26, 2025, that trust was shattered. 15-year-old Marjay Dotson was shot and killed beside the park's pool, and 14-year-old Jeremy Harrod was critically wounded. The shooter wasn't a stranger lurking in the bushes. It was Charles Leto, a 55-year-old lifeguard who had just finished his shift. He claimed self-defense, but the witnesses and video tell a different story. This is the story of warnings ignored, a community in mourning, and a family forever changed. This is Dead Speaks. Before the shots rang out at Douglas Park, before a 15-year-old boy's life was stolen, there were warning signs, many of them, and they were ignored. Charles Leto wasn't just a man with a short fuse. He was a man with a history. 2 years before Marjay's death, Charles Leto walked into a quiet Lakeview alley. It was February 2023. Cold, still, Jackie Michaels had taken her two dogs, Barry and Okie, out behind her home. The air was calm until the dogs saw something. They barked. They didn't bite. They didn't lunge. They barked. Leto said nothing. He didn't step back. He didn't call for help. Instead, he reached for his gun and opened fire. Barry was killed instantly. Okie collapsed, bleeding, and would spend months recovering from his wounds. The gunfire shattered the winter quiet. Neighbors ducked inside. Schools went into lockdown. A SWAT team descended on the block. It was loud, both literally and figuratively. The story made the news. Leto claimed he feared for his life, and prosecutors agreed. Self-defense, they said. Case closed. But here's what wasn't closed: his access to children. Despite the shooting, despite the chaos he caused, Charles Leto kept his job with the Chicago Park District. Within months, he was back in uniform, stationed at pools, tasked with protecting the very lives parents entrusted to him. Charles Leto kept his job with the Chicago Park District. And his aggression didn't end. At Gill Park, another pool on Chicago's north side, a father brought his young daughter for swim lessons. He reported that Leto berated him in front of his child, yelled, threatened, all unprovoked. The father drafted a formal complaint, but he never sent it. Out of fear? Out of frustration? Or maybe just believing, like so many others, that nothing would be done. And he may have been right. When the Chicago Park District launched an internal review following Marjay's death, officials discovered something troubling. There were multiple prior incidents involving Leto, conflicts with parents, complaints from coworkers. but almost none of them were ever documented. They had vanished into silence, and silence is what allowed Charles to continue moving from one pool to another, from one confrontation to the next, until he found himself in Douglas Park. After a string of unrecorded conflicts and a shooting that never should have been forgotten, Charles Leto was moved again, this time to a community, a neighborhood with a heartbeat, a past, and scars that run deep. North Lawndale, predominantly black, long underserved, and weary of anyone with a badge or a weapon, is a community that knows too well what happens when power is placed in the wrong hands. And into that neighborhood, Charles Leto arrived, not as an officer, but as a lifeguard. But residents say he didn't carry himself as a lifeguard. He barked at teenagers, clashed with parents. He paced the pool deck like it was a perimeter, not a playground. There was no smile, no warmth, just tension. And he wasn't carrying sunscreen and a whistle. No. Leto brought with him a semi-automatic pistol, 2 fully loaded magazines, and a Kevlar vest panel, and even a satellite phone. Like, he was preparing for battle, not pool duty. He was ready for something, just not doing the job he was hired to do. One father later said Leto threatened him and his children during an argument at the pool. He said Leto's presence made families feel watched, policed, unsafe. But once again, that complaint never made it past the pool's gates. No report, no follow-up, no red flag in his file. Despite it all, the dog shooting in 2023, the escalating confrontations, the unshakable sense of danger, Leto passed the Chicago Parks District's background checks. And so, every day that summer, he stood poolside at Douglas Park, armed, agitated, and trusted with the safety of children. On June 26, 2025, the second day Chicago's pools were open for the summer, the sun was beginning its slow descent, spilling gold over Douglas Park. The air was still warm, but the evening breeze carried that soft hum of a day winding down. The pool was closed for the night. Families were gathering towels, shaking water off their hair, calling for their kids to head home. Somewhere on the edge of the deck, Charles Leto stood beside his bike. His backpack was open on the ground. From a distance, it looked like the day was over, but something was brewing. From the far side of the sidewalk, 3 boys approached. Marjay Dotson, 15, with summer dreams still ahead of him. Jeremy Harrod, 14, the cousin of Laquan McDonald, a name already etched in Chicago's history of loss. And a third team whose name has been withheld, but whose life was also changed forever. They walked together, 3 kids heading toward the street, toward home. Prosecutors say the boys never laid a hand on Leto's bike. The surveillance cameras show it clearly. No grabs, no shoving, no real words of exchange. One of them glanced at the bike, maybe even muttered something under his breath, a tease, a harmless jab, but nothing close to a threat. Leto bent down, flipped over his bike, and reached into his bag. He pulled out a semi-automatic pistol, and in the stillness of that summer night, the sound of the first shot cracked the air like glass. Marjay turned to run. He never made it far. The bullet tore into his back, dropping him to the pavement. Jeremy was hit next, shot in the neck. The round shattered a vertebrae and severed a major artery, leaving him fighting for his life before he even hit the ground. The third boy ran. Behind him, another shot rang out, missing him by inches. The boys had no weapons. They posed no danger. The only threat that night was standing at the pool, finger on the trigger. When the gunfire stopped, Leto didn't rush to help. He didn't kneel beside the wounded. He calmly took out his phone and dialed 911. His voice was measured, almost casual, as he claimed the boys had tried to steal his bike, that he'd been forced to fire in self-defense. But the cameras told a different story, and so did the witnesses. There was no fight, no knife, no gun, just three boys walking away when Charles Leto opened fire.
Lifeguard in court today charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder in the shooting of two teens in Douglas Park late Thursday night. And tonight, new details, what the suspect told police at the scene. Chicago lifeguard Charles Leto making his first court appearance following the shooting of two teenagers at a crowded basketball court near the swimming pool in Douglas Park Thursday night. According to court documents, when police arrived at the scene, the 55-year-old from Lakeview was asked, "Are you shot?" To which he replied, "I'm not shot, I'm the lifeguard." This surveillance video obtained by Fox 32 captures the seconds leading up to the shooting. According to eyewitnesses at the scene, Leto was fixing his bike when he was approached by a 15-year-old boy and a 14-year-old boy who has been identified as the cousin of Laquan McDonald, who was shot and killed by Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke in 2014. Leto reportedly got into a verbal exchange with the 15-year-old before pulling a handgun from a backpack and opening fire, striking the 15-year-old in the back and the 14-year-old in the neck. The 15-year-old was pronounced dead at Stroger Hospital. Tonight, the 14-year-old is in critical condition. Prosecutors say while there is video of the confrontation, there is no audio. Court documents indicate that a third person was shot at and that Leto was never in any danger, despite telling police, "Those two attacked me and followed me. I defended myself. I have a license." Following his arrest, police determined Leto does possess a valid FOID card, including a concealed carry license. Tonight, Charles Leto is charged with first-degree murder and first-degree attempted murder, along with other charges. He's being held without bond until trial.
Marjay collapsed face down onto the pavement, his body still, blood booming beneath him like a spreading shadow. Jeremy crumbled nearby, one hand instinctively reaching for his neck, trying to stem the warm rush of blood as each breath grew harder. The third boy stood frozen for a heartbeat, then ran, his footsteps pounding against the concrete, carrying the sound of panic into the distance. Neighbors rushed toward the chaos. Some shouted for help. Others dropped to their knees beside the boys, pressing shirts, towels, anything to the wounds. Phones lit up as frantic hands dialed 911. The air was thick with the smell of chlorine, sweat, and a metallic tang of blood. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Within minutes, first responders arrived. Firefighters, EMTs, and the police were spilling into the park. They worked quickly, lifting Marjay and Jeremy onto stretchers. Marjay was unresponsive. Jeremy's eyes darted in shock, his breath shallow, his skin pale. They were both rushed to John H. Strong Hospital. At the hospital, doctors fought to save them. Jeremy would survive, but barely. For Marjay, there was nothing more they could do. Just hours after the shooting, his mother would receive the news no parent should ever hear. Her son was gone. Back at the park, Charles Leto never fled. He stayed, calm, collected. Police approached him, weapons drawn. They disarmed him, confiscated the semi-automatic pistol still warm from firing, 2 spare loaded magazines, and a bullet-resist vest panel, and a satellite phone, all from a bag of a man whose job was supposed to be saving lives, not ending them. To the officers, Leto repeated his story. The boys had tried to steal his bike, he said. He was protecting himself, but the story didn't survive long. Prosecutors reviewed the surveillance footage. They interviewed the witnesses, and what they saw was clear. There was no theft, no attack, no justification. Just 3 boys walking away, and a lifeguard who chose to open fire. He was 15, a rising sophomore at UIC College Prep High School, with a smile so bright it could crack even the sternest face. The kind of kid who could turn an ordinary afternoon into something memorable just by being himself. His family called him goofy, loving, full of life. He loved video games. He loved clowning around with his cousins until their sides ached from laughter. On summer days, those long, golden Chicago sunny days, he loved the pool. The splash of the water, the weightlessness, the way it felt like time didn't exist. That summer, Marjay was doing what so many parents dream for their kids, earning an honest paycheck, staying out of trouble, building toward the future. Through the One Summer Chicago Jobs program, he was learning responsibility, meeting new people, and most importantly, staying safe. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, just a clean slate and a lifetime ahead of him. On July 9th, 2025, that lifetime was over.
15-year-old remains in the hospital, and the 15-year-old who was shot and killed is laid to rest. Today, family and friends attended the funeral service for Marjay Dotson.
My heart is heavy because that shouldn't happen. When I see the video, but he wasn't even nowhere near the bed. He didn't deserve it. He didn't deserve it.
His family wanted the service to be private after his death was all too public.
He was a good boy. I loved him, and we're gonna miss him.
Dotson was 15 years old and a student at UIC College Prep.
Nothing but good things to say, like truly a light. Just brighten up every room he was in, brighten up my day. And
his summer was just beginning when he was shot and killed outside of the Douglas Park pool June 26th. 14-year-old Jeremy Herod was also shot and remains in the hospital. Herod's parents attended today's service.
It's rough. A lot of emotions came through, but gotta stay strong for everybody.
Pain that this family is feeling should not be. Should not be. We don't send our children to the park to die, not at the hands of government. So we have to do better.
The 15-year-old had a private burial with his family and friends, still stunned by the events of the last 2 weeks.
The Healing Temple Church overflowed with people, friends, families, neighbors, activists, community leaders, all drawn together by grief and outrage. Every pew was filled, voices cracked as hymns were sung, and when the casket closed, Marjay's mother collapsed, her body folding under the kind of sorrow that doesn't let go. From the pulpit, speakers called for justice, demanding answers and accountability. From the back rows, neighbors whispered, the question hanging in the air: how could a man with a history of violence have been placed in charge of protecting children? On Chicago's west side, where the fight against gun violence has waged for generations and mistrust of authority runs deep, Marjay's death felt like more than a loss. It was another cruel strike against a community already living on edge. The second child struck down that night was 14-year-old Jeremy Herod. Not just another name in the police report. Not just another statistic. Jeremy is Laquan McDonald's cousin, the teenager whose 2014 killing by a Chicago police officer ignited nationwide outrage and demands for justice. That history, that pain, already ran deep in his family. Jeremy is described by those who know him as a sharp-witted and quick to smile, a kid who could lighten a room with a joke, and whose dream was to one day be the first in his family to graduate college. He loved pickup basketball at the park, music in his earbuds, and sitting on the porch with his grandmother in the summer twilight. On June 26th, that future was almost stolen. A single bullet torn to his neck, severing an artery and fracturing a vertebrae, leaving him gasping for air, his friends screaming for help. He did survive, but the damage runs deeper than the wound itself. Doctors warn he may live with permanent physical limitations. The road ahead will be long, filled with surgeries, therapy sessions, and the kind of exhaustion no child should have to endure. For his family, it's a cruel echo. Another young black boy shot in Chicago. Another mother waking each day to the sound of monitors and hospital machines instead of her son's laughter. Another family pulled into the relentless cycle of trauma, fear, and survival, fighting not just for justice, but for a future they refused to give up on. News of the shooting raced across Chicago in hours. By nightfall, the gates of Douglas Park were lined with candles, flowers, and hand-painted signs bearing one name in bold black letters: Marjay Dotson. To the headlines, he was just another statistic. But to those gathered in the summer heat, he was the boy who would drop everything to help his grandmother carry groceries. The cousin who stayed late at the pool so the younger kids could get one more turn on the diving board. The teen with the laugh that could cut through the hardest day. Monique Scott stood shoulder to shoulder with neighbors, pastors, and youth advocates, demanding more than condolence. They demand change. The Park District answered with promises: stronger background checks, mandatory de-escalation training, stricter enforcement of its no firearms policy. But in North Longdale, the words rang hollow. This wasn't their first vigil. It wasn't their first promise. Weeks later, an internal report confirmed that the neighborhood already knew. Charles Leto had a history of conflicts that went undocumented, unaddressed, until the day Marjay's name was added to the city's long roll of gone too soon. Police reforms were announced: incident logs, hiring overhauls, new oversight protocols. But no policy could bring back the boy with the easy smile and boundless summers ahead. Charles Leto was arrested at the scene. He now faces charges of first-degree murder for killing Marjay Dotson, attempted first-degree murder, and aggravated battery for wounding Jeremy Herod, and aggravated discharge of a firearm. At his bond hearing, prosecutors described him as a clear danger to the public. A judge ordered him held without bail. Leto's attorneys argued self-defense, claiming he feared for his life. Prosecutors countered. Teens were no threat. They were unarmed, walking away. As of now, Leto remains behind bars at the Cook County Jail awaiting trial. His next court date is scheduled for later this year. 15-year-old Marjay Dotson will never see another sunset over Douglas Park. 14-year-old Jeremy Herod will carry the scars, both seen and unseen, for the rest of his life. Their families are left holding memories where their children should be, replaying the what-ifs that no parent should have to imagine. How does a man with a history of violence end up in charge of protecting children? Why did reports go unfouled, warnings ignored, and red flags dismissed as if they were nothing? This was not a lapse. It was a chain of failures, of policy, of leadership, of basic human duty, and it cost a child his life. Communities like North Longdale deserve more than condolences after the fact. They deserve the kind of safety that doesn't require a prayer before sending a child to the pool. They deserve lifeguards who guard life, officials who act before tragedy strikes, and systems that serve, not fail, the people who depend on them. At Dead Speaks, we don't let the names of the lost fade into silence. We speak them, we remember them, and we fight for better in their honor. If you enjoyed this thoughtful storytelling, please hit like and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.